gentlemen, the end is here. Sorry for everything I've done. I love you all.
Imagine the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, performing his last show. A night so shrouded in mystery that the truth about his final hours has been hidden for decades until now. On the night Elvis Presley had a heart attack, it wasn't just a medical emergency. It was the beginning of the end for a man who had captivated millions, and yet the shocking details of that night remain largely unknown to the world. Elvis Presley tragically passed away on August 16, 1977, but many still don't realize that just hours before, something much darker occurred. He suffered a heart attack, and what happened in the hours that followed has remained a closely guarded secret for decades. But tonight we reveal the truth and the shocking news you never knew about his death. It was just another night in Memphis when Elvis Presley's health took a dramatic turn. By the time he was found on the floor of his bathroom, unresponsive, the world would lose a legend. But was it just his heart that failed him, or was there something more at play in his final hour? If Elvis were here, he'd say, "Thank you very much for subscribing. Are you a real fan? Let's find out." Elvis Presley had been struggling with his health for years before his sudden death. While the world continued to see him as the larger-than-life superstar, behind the scenes, the king was battling a number of personal demons that were slowly taking a toll on his body. But it wasn't just his personal issues. His physical health was deteriorating faster than most people realized. In the years leading up to his death, Elvis had become a shadow of his former self. The once vibrant and energetic performer who could light up the stage with his magnetic presence had begun to show signs of exhaustion and wear. His weight had ballooned, and he had become noticeably sluggish during performances. His fans noticed that he was no longer the energetic, smooth-talking star of the 50s and 60s, but a tired and disoriented version of the icon they once adored. Elvis had always had a difficult relationship with drugs. Prescription medications became a constant companion, a tool to cope with the pressures of fame and an escape from his deep emotional struggle. By the mid-1970s, Elvis was known to be heavily dependent on painkillers, sleeping pills, and other substances. Doctors had prescribed medications to him in an attempt to treat a variety of ailments, but in reality, these drugs were only exacerbating his health problems. He had reportedly struggled with high blood pressure, liver issues, and chronic insomnia. His diet was atrocious. He would regularly indulge in fast food, which further contributed to his worsening health. It's also been said that Elvis suffered from severe constipation, which contributed to his discomfort. His friends and family, aware of his addictions, watched helplessly as he spiraled downward. By the time of his final performances in the summer of 1977, it was clear that Elvis was no longer the man he had once been. Concert-goers could see the difference in his energy levels. His movements were slower and his voice was often strained. What many didn't know was that behind closed doors, Elvis was in constant pain and suffering from various medical issues. He would often require frequent visits from his personal physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, who was criticized for prescribing Elvis an alarming amount of medications. However, Elvis continued to push through, driven by his need to perform and maintain his status as the king. But despite his efforts to stay in the public eye, Elvis's deteriorating health could no longer be hidden. His last concert on June 26, 1977 in Indianapolis was marred by signs of a man struggling with his health. Elvis had difficulty keeping up with the demands of the show. Fans noticed him acting strange, almost detached, and he had even forgotten some of the lyrics to his own songs. It was a stark contrast to the legendary shows of his past, where he commanded the stage with an undeniable charisma. Despite all these warning signs, no one could have predicted just how quickly things would take a turn. Within weeks, Elvis's condition worsened dramatically, and on the night of August 15, 1977, the king of rock and roll would suffer the final blow to his body, setting the stage for a tragic and mysterious event the following day. The night of August 15, 1977 began like any other for Elvis Presley. He had returned to his Graceland home after spending the day in Memphis, and as usual, he was staying up late into the night. Elvis's schedule was erratic, often staying up well into the early hours of the morning, trying to manage his insomnia. On that particular night, he had plans to meet with his friends and discuss new projects, but as the evening wore on, he began to feel unwell. Around 1:30 a.m. on August 16th, Elvis was alone in his bathroom at Graceland. It was there that he suffered a heart attack. The details of what exactly happened are still unclear, but what we do know is that Elvis collapsed in the bathroom, likely due to the massive strain on his heart. His body had been pushing itself beyond its limits for years, weakened by his unhealthy lifestyle and addiction to prescription prescription drugs. The stress, combined with a possible undiagnosed heart condition, may have been the perfect storm that led to the fatal heart attack. At the time, Elvis's girlfriend, Ginger Alden, was in another part of the house. She later recalled hearing a loud thud from the bathroom and rushing to find Elvis on the floor, unresponsive. She immediately called for help, and by the time the paramedics arrived, Elvis was already in cardiac arrest. The emergency responders attempted to resuscitate him, but it was clear that Elvis had already passed away by the time they reached him. What followed was a chaotic series of events. As word spread that Elvis had been found unresponsive in his bathroom, his family and close friends arrived at Graceland. They were joined by medical personnel who did everything they could to revive him, but it was too late. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was gone. Though the initial reports suggested a heart attack as the cause of death, the truth surrounding Elvis's health and the circumstances surrounding his final hours remained clouded in mystery. The public was devastated, unable to comprehend the sudden loss of a man who had been larger than life. But what many didn't know at the time was that there had been a more complicated story behind his death, a story that didn't immediately come to light. In the aftermath of his passing, conspiracy theories began to swirl. Some speculated that Elvis's death was the result of years of substance abuse, while others believed that he had suffered from an undiagnosed medical condition that led to the heart attack. What was undeniable, however, was the shocking speed with which Elvis had gone from a man still active in his career to the tragic end of an era. The news of Elvis's heart attack was only the beginning of a much larger and more mysterious story. While the world mourned the loss of an icon, the people closest to him had to reckon with the darker reality of what had truly caused Elvis's health to deteriorate so rapidly. What came next would be a series of events that would unravel secrets and leave many wondering if his death was entirely natural or if something far more sinister had played a part. In the following days, as the details of Elvis's death began to emerge, the world was left with more questions than answers. What had truly happened on the night of his heart attack? What was the real cause of Elvis Presley's untimely death? And could anyone have done something to prevent it? The aftermath of Elvis Presley's death on August 16, 1977 was nothing short of a media frenzy. Fans worldwide were stunned, with thousands of people flooding to Graceland, and the entire world seemed to pause in disbelief. But even as the public mourned the loss of one of the most influential figures in music history, something was unfolding behind closed doors that would lead to confusion, suspicion, and the rise of conspiracy theory. The details of Elvis's final hours became the subject of intense scrutiny, and what emerged was a series of inconsistencies that raised more questions than answers. Almost immediately, there were discrepancies between what was reported by the media and what was actually happening behind the scene. The initial reports suggested that Elvis had passed away from a heart attack caused by natural health issues, but there were murmurs about foul play and possible cover-up. These suspicions were fueled in part by the fact that Elvis's health had been in serious decline for years. The combination of his known drug abuse, the medical treatments he had received, and his unhealthy lifestyle all pointed to a heart that was perhaps too worn down by years of strain. However, even though his death was ruled as the result of a heart attack, many felt that the true cause of his death was being hidden. One of the first signs of a cover-up, or at the very least a lack of transparency, came with the autopsy. While it was officially reported that Elvis had died from a heart attack, the details of the autopsy were not made public for some time. This only fueled speculation about what had actually caused his death. Why was it taking so long for the full autopsy report to be released? Why were certain aspects of his health history not being discussed openly? As the official autopsy was delayed, many close to Elvis began to suspect that there was more to the story. Dr. George Nichopoulos, Elvis's personal physician, became a controversial figure in the days following Elvis's death. He had been the one to prescribe numerous medications to Elvis over the years and had been under intense scrutiny for the role he may have played in enabling Elvis's drug dependency. Dr. Nichopoulos was criticized for his part in Elvis's deteriorating health, and many began to wonder if his excessive prescriptions had contributed to Elvis's heart attack. But despite the allegations and rumors surrounding his medical care, Nichopoulos remained one of the key figures in Elvis's life and even participated in discussions surrounding his death. Another troubling aspect of the cover-up theory came from the inconsistent reports about the state of Elvis's body after his death. Several witnesses Witnesses, including those who had seen him before his death, mentioned that Elvis had been noticeably ill in the weeks leading up to his passing. But after his body was found, there were claims that he had been in far worse shape than initially reported. Some suggested that the king had been in such poor health that his body had already begun to deteriorate before his passing. Furthermore, there were claims of bruises on his body that didn't quite match the explanation of a simple heart attack. The question that lingered was whether Elvis's health had been exacerbated by the drugs he had been taking. Autopsy results would eventually reveal that he had high levels of prescription drugs in his system, but the extent to which these substances contributed to his heart attack was never fully explained. The lack of a clear, definitive answer only increased the sense of suspicion surrounding the circumstances of his death. As the weeks and months passed after Elvis Presley's death, a dark legacy began to form around the king of rock and roll. What was initially seen as a natural tragedy was slowly being reframed as something far more complicated, and the more time passed, the more it seemed as though the true story behind his demise was being deliberately obscured. Fans and the media were left to speculate about what had really caused Elvis's death, and the conspiracy theories surrounding his heart attack only grew more complex. One of the most pervasive theories was that Elvis's death wasn't a simple heart attack, but rather the result of years of mistreatment by both the people around him and the medical professionals who had been tasked with caring for him. It's now widely acknowledged that Elvis was dependent on prescription drugs, but many of those close to him, including his doctor, were complicit in enabling his addiction. Dr. George Nicopolis had been one of the most significant contributors to Elvis's drug dependency, regularly prescribing a wide range of medications to keep the star going despite the clear toll it was taking on his body. Nicopolis's involvement in Elvis's life, both as a medical professional and as someone close to the Presley family, raised serious questions about how much he had known about Elvis's declining health. Elvis's family was also caught up in the aftermath, grappling with the reality of his death and trying to understand whether there had been any way to prevent it. Many wondered if those closest to him had failed to intervene in a meaningful way. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife, had been a constant in his life, and she struggled with the loss in her own way. She had remained close to Elvis even after their divorce, and she was devastated by his death, though the circumstances surrounding it added a layer of complexity to her grief. Many close to the Presley family believed that Priscilla, along with others in the circle, had tried to get Elvis help, but the star had resisted treatment time and time again. It's hard to know whether anyone could have stopped Elvis from continuing down the path of destruction that led to his untimely death. The lingering suspicion surrounding his death only increased as the years went by. More and more people began to question the official narrative, and the darker elements of his life started to come to the forefront. The fact that Elvis had been surrounded by people who were enabling his addictions and who may have been unaware of how dire his health had become cast a shadow over his legacy. He wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He was a man trapped by his own demons, his addiction, and the pressures of fame. Elvis's heart attack, officially deemed the cause of death, became a symbol of the destructive power of fame, addiction, and the loneliness that even the greatest stars can face. For years, many believed that Elvis's passing was the result of a natural health decline, but the truth is far more complicated. His death became a symbol of a larger issue: how fame, coupled with unhealthy lifestyles, could end a life prematurely. His passing was not just the death of an icon, but the death of an entire era of music, the collapse of an image, and the beginning of a long, drawn-out process of myth-building and speculation. As the years went by, Elvis's death continued to be a topic of intense discussion. His legacy lived on through his music, but the truth about his last days remained shrouded in mystery. Did Elvis truly die of a heart attack, or was there more to the story? The questions about his health, the role of his doctor, and the circumstances surrounding his death never fully went away. Instead, they formed a part of the mythos surrounding Elvis Presley, a man whose death left a scar on the history of music and who was mourned not only for the legend he had become, but for the man whose life was ultimately claimed by the very fame he had achieved. And while his music continues to live on, the final chapter of Elvis Presley's life remains as elusive as the man himself. Whether you believe in the conspiracy theories or accept the official cause of death, one thing is clear: Elvis Presley's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was the beginning of a legacy wrapped in questions that may never be fully answered. Elvis Presley's death in 1977 left behind not only an iconic legacy of music and culture, but also a vast array of unanswered questions. As the years have gone by, his death has become the subject of countless conspiracy conspiracy theories and speculation. Despite the official cause of death being ruled as a heart attack, many have refused to accept that the king of rock and roll simply passed away from natural causes. Theories surrounding his death continue to thrive in pop culture, often taking on lives of their own and creating an almost mythical narrative about the circumstances surrounding his final hour. One of the most enduring conspiracy theories is that Elvis did not die in 1977 at all. The Elvis is alive theory has persisted for decades, with some claiming that the king faked his own death in order to escape the pressures of fame and live a quieter life away from the public eye. Proponents of this theory point to alleged sightings of Elvis in the years after his death, claiming that the superstar had been spotted in various places from the streets of Memphis to remote areas across the country. These sightings, however, have never been substantiated, and most are likely the result of wishful thinking and fan obsession with the idea that their hero never truly left. The theory that Elvis's death was not an accident, but rather part of a more sinister plot, is another that has captured the imagination of many. Some suggest that Elvis was targeted by those who stood to gain from his death, perhaps due to his growing financial troubles or his strained relationships with those around him. This theory often points to the alleged negligence of Elvis's doctor, Dr. George Nicopolis, who continued to prescribe him powerful medications despite his deteriorating health. Critics argue that Nicopolis may have played a larger role in Elvis's demise than was initially acknowledged. Additionally, there are those who believe that the official autopsy did not provide a full picture of Elvis's health in the days leading up to his death. The fact that Elvis had a history of drug abuse combined with his heart problems may have led some to question whether the heart attack was the only contributing factor to his untimely demise. Was there something more at play that was hidden from the public eye? Many continue to scrutinize the inconsistencies in the autopsy report and the delayed release of details surrounding Elvis's health, believing that the true cause of death may have been covered up to protect certain people or institutions. The larger-than-life nature of Elvis Presley's persona and the fact that his life was constantly under a microscope have made it impossible for the truth to remain static. With so many unanswered questions, conspiracy theories surrounding his death will likely continue to evolve and multiply as time goes on. The idea that the king's death remains an unresolved mystery has only added to the allure of his legacy, keeping fans engaged and curious about what really happened on the night of August 16, 1977. Whether you believe in the official cause of death or subscribe to one of the many conspiracy theories that have followed, one thing is certain: Elvis Presley's influence on music, entertainment, and popular culture is undeniable. His music lives on, and his legacy continues to inspire generations of fans, musicians, and performers. The king may have left the building, but the mystery surrounding his death remains an indelible part of his story. As we look back on the life and legacy of Elvis Presley, we are reminded that sometimes the truth is more elusive than we'd like to believe. While we may never know the full details of his final hours, it's clear that the impact he made during his life and the questions surrounding his death will continue to shape how we remember him for years to come. But we want to hear from you. What do you think happened the night Elvis Presley passed away? Do you believe the official cause of death? Or are you convinced there's more to the story? Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the shocking truth behind Elvis's death, be sure to hit the like button, share this video with your fellow Elvis fans, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories and in-depth analyses of the mysteries that still captivate the world.